You're now seeing conflicting reports around the killing of Jonathan Joss, and it's got the internet divided. We're now seeing Pride abandoned by big corporations. You just had a crazy plot twist in the national news of a guy who was accused of threatening to kill Trump. You've had a scandal growing around Trump's new FEMA head who told staff he didn't know there was a hurricane season. Which I'll add all that and much more on today's brand new Philip DeFranco show. He daily dive into the news, starting with this. It was after Jonathan Joss just killed in a homophobic hate crime. That was what many people are asking and flaming after he was just shot dead outside of his home in San Antonio on Sunday after an altercation with a neighbor who reportedly was apprehended soon after. And Joss, if you don't know, he's best known for his roles in King of the Hill and Parks and Rec, and was visiting the site of his recently burned down home with his husband, Tristan Kern Gonzalez. And according to a Facebook post from Gonzalez, when we returned to the site to check our mail, we discovered the skull of one of our dogs and its harness placed in clear view. This caused both of us severe emotional distress. We began yelling and crying in response to the pain of what we saw. While we were doing this, a man approached us. He started yelling violent homophobic slurs at us. He then raised a gun from his lap and fired. Gonzalez then going on to write that he was murdered by someone who could not stand the sight of two men loving each other. And so he had a statement painting a pretty clear picture as to why this couple was targeted, but he had San Antonio police heavily disputing that and saying, "Our investigation has found no evidence whatsoever to indicate that Mr. Joss's murder was related to his sexual orientation. Should any new evidence come to light, we will charge the suspect accordingly." And so with that, as it turns out, according to reports, this is not the first time the couple has had issues with the neighbors. So Tristan, he didn't think it seemed like their recently burned down home was possibly because of arson. The writing, that home was burned down after over 2 years of threats from people in the area who repeatedly told us they would set it on fire. We report these threats to law enforcement multiple times and nothing was done. And then all of this is the neighbors have their own version of events, and they're painting a much different picture of Joss's time on the street. For example, one's out at my San Antonio that, quote, he would just walk up and down the street, he would just like screams, and he was just very loud, but we knew how he was, so we wouldn't disturb it. Even if he looked at us, talked next to us, we just ignored him because we knew that's how he was. You also had neighbors telling local outlet KENS5 that Joss and the man who shot him had a long-standing feud and often faced off with weapons. So sometimes Joss was even armed with a crossbow. Also, others reportedly called the police for mental welfare checks on Joss over 40 times since January of 2024. And to be clear, essentially all of this was in 2024 since he really wasn't around after the home burned down in January. You also had some feeling that the shooting was just bound to happen because of Joss's alleged mental health issues, with one then telling the local paper that, "I'm so sad it had become to this," saying, "We all knew it was going to end up like this because of his antics. It's sad because this could have been prevented if he had gotten the help he needed." He also had another claiming that the shooting was because a neighbor was, quote, fed up with Joss. And with all that, as far as how people are reacting online, you have people really not only talk about what a great person Joss was to be around, but also taking Tristan's claim that this was caused by homophobia at face value. Some have even claimed that this ties into a broader trend across the U.S. that we're seeing the country shift to the right over the years. So there, it should also be pointed out that the belief that you should kill someone for being gay, that's extremely fringe even among the right. You've also seen the situation fueling anger and frustration as some media outlets for how they tackled the issue. For example, you had the New York Post initially saying that the shooting was because of an argument between Joss and his neighbor, which led to takes like a big fuck you to the New York Post, who were reducing this merge to an argument with neighbor, saying Jonathan Joss was the victim of the hate crime and died protecting his husband. Queer people shouldn't be killed for who they love / who they are. We deserve the right to exist. Also, as far as the Post has since released new articles that explicitly mention that Tristan claims it was a hate crime and the police deny that. Generally the most common response to all this has just been sympathy and sadness at just how pointless the killing was, regardless of the reason. With, for example, Nick Offerman, who had roles alongside Joss, writing him a statement. "The cast has been texting together about it all day, and we're just heartbroken. Jonathan was such a sweet guy, and we loved having him as our chief Ken Hotatsu hit. Terrible tragedy." With that, I think it's important to remember at the very least, whether it was because Joss was gay or having a particularly hard mental day after seeing his burned down home and dead dog, neither are an excuse for murder. But ultimately, that is where we are with this just horrible situation right now. As we wait to see if any more information or evidence comes out, I'd love to know your thoughts on this, sold with the situation at hand as well as the reactions. But then, from there, shifting gears from that, Pedro Pascal, Ariana Grande, and Sabrina Carpenter are fighting back against the Trump administration's efforts to cut funding to LGBTQ plus suicide prevention. Noticing the Trevor Project publishing an open letter signed by around 100 big names addressing the fact that the government is reportedly considering defunding LGBTQ plus services from the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Because while anyone in crisis can call 988 in the U.S., the line has counselors especially trained for high-risk high-risk groups like LGBTQ plus youth. And that, as you see things like last year, around 40% of young people in that community considered suicide, and 1 in 10 had an attempt. And so we had this new celebrity-backed letter saying, since its launch in 2022, this program has connected nearly 1.3 million crisis contacts with life-saving, affirming care to LGBTQ plus young people during their most vulnerable moments, and saying this is about people, not politics. At a time of deep division, let this be something we as people can all agree on. No young person should be left without help in their darkest moment. Stripping away this lifeline leaves LGBTQ plus youth with the message that their lives are not worth saving. We refuse to accept that message. We call on the administration and Congress to do the right thing, restore and protect funding for the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline's LGBTQ plus youth specialized services in the fiscal year 2026 budget. The letter also addressing young LGBTQ plus people specifically and telling them that they are not alone and that people are fighting for them. And then as far as the general public, they encourage those interested to sign a petition to protect these lifeline programs. So you have many wondering if anything will actually be done because this is not happening in a bubble. Or the Trump administration has canceled grants aimed at researching and funding LGBTQ plus health initiatives. You then also have Trump's anti-DEI orders and rhetoric that have heavily targeted the community. Right, and all this is playing out as Pride Month is kicked off, and you have many arguing that it feels like there's been a massive cultural shift. And one of the ways that you have people saying that we're seeing that is tons of corporate sponsors backing out supporting Pride events, which, as it turns out, among other things, has caused budget shortfalls in cities all around the country. San Francisco Pride, for example, lost 5 major corporate backers, including Comcast, Smirnoff, and more. The city's organizers now facing a $200,000 budget gap. You're also seeing in Kansas City, they're down the same amount, which is roughly half of KC Pride's whole budget. You've also got the group behind New York City's Pride, the Sickities, trying to fill a $750,000 gap, and in St. Louis, after Anheuser-Busch ended its Pride sponsorship, organizers are down 150K. And then with all this, you have Suzanne Ford, the executive director of San Francisco Pride, telling the AP, with everything we're facing from the Trump administration, to lose 5 of your partners within a couple of weeks, it felt like we're being abandoned. Right? And then, reportedly after corporate withdrawals from Pride being headlines with some companies opting to donate, but apparently only doing so anonymously. And so with that, you have places like AP reporting that the shift reflects how corporations are adjusting to a changing cultural landscape that began during the pandemic and accelerated with Trump's second term. And then also with this situation, we have people kind of focusing on World Pride, which is being held in Washington, D.C. this year, with then tons of reports knowing that people have kind of pretty complicated feelings on this for obvious reasons I get assumed. For example, the founder and CEO of the travel platform Everywhere telling CBS News, what is happening socially and politically changes the feeling of the Pride that you are attending, and World Pride will likely bring an astronomical amount of fear and sadness from people. Because while some, they see this current administration and they feel more motivated to attend Pride to stick it to the Trump administration, you have others scared to attend in this political climate. And actually with that, you do have some cities acknowledging the political elephant in the room. It's San Francisco's Pride theme is queer joy as resistance. New York's is rise up, pride and protest. You had Suzanne Ford adding, if you come to Pride this year, that's a revolutionary act. You are sending a message to those in Washington that here in San Francisco, we still have the same values that we've always had. You can love who you love here. We're not going to retreat from that. And then we have a lot more news that we need to talk about today. But first, writing on the letters, and you had prosecutors saying the police listened to phone calls Scott had made from jail, including ones where he talked about sending letters, asked for the address of the Wisconsin AG's office, and repeatedly talked about how he had a plan that was going to get his case dismissed, with him even explicitly saying on one call, this dude is a goddamn illegal immigrant and they just need to pick his ass up. If he gets picked out by ICE, there won't be a jury trial, so they will probably dismiss it that day. That's my point. And then here's the real kicker. The complaint literally says that during an interview with police on May 30th, Scott admitted that he wrote everything on the letter, and is adding that he, quote, admitted that his intention was not to go after President Trump, but solely to prevent Morales-Reyes from testifying at his trial. And so now, in addition to other charges against him, prosecutors have filed new charges of identity theft, bail jumping, and felony intimidation of a witness in a criminal complaint, with Scott's trial scheduled for July. But as far as Morales-Reyes, when asked if he still faces deportation given this wild development, you had a DHS spokesperson saying in a statement, the investigation into the threat is ongoing, and adding, over the course of the investigation, this individual was determined to be in the country illegally and that he had a criminal record. He will remain in custody. You then also add his deportation defense lawyer telling reporters that he is working to get Morales-Reyes released from custody and pursue any relief he may qualify for in immigration court. And so we'll see what happens there soon, but just a wild, wild piece of news. But then, next up from that, Donald Trump's new acting head of FEMA genuinely just learned that hurricane season is a thing. That tragically is a very real question that's being debated by lawmakers right now. I mean, to just give you a little background here in case you're not up to date on FEMA, I don't know why it would be. Early last month, Trump appointed David Richardson as the acting administrator of the emergency department after firing the previous leader who Trump himself had literally appointed just months early. With that guy up here, Andy got the boot because he had the audacity to tell Congress that he felt that it might be a bad idea to eliminate FEMA entirely, which of course, notably, it has been a Trump goal for a while, though notably, it's been reported that Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, whose agency oversees FEMA, has quietly taken steps to keep the agency running because there's no alternative to replace, or because as it